please.
Commissioner Bagnell. Here. Commissioner Backenstedt.
Here.
Commissioner Coronado. Commissioner Elrod. Oh, you're
Here.
Commissioner Gallagher. Commissioner Newfinke.
Here.
Commissioner Metcalf.
Here.
Commissioner Ranville.
Here.
Commissioner Samuelson.
Here.
And the first item is, do we have any changes to the agenda?
I did hand out a revised agenda. I think all the changes, in fact, I looked again, all the changes are to the upcoming meetings of interest. So there's some changes in terms of what the agendas are going to be and some other things.
Seeing no changes to the agenda, can we move to talking about the agenda goals and procedures for the meeting, Dennis?
Yeah. Primary thing tonight is to look at the public hearing for September 22nd and get our process in order. It's looking like the meeting on September 12th, which would be our next meeting, would be canceled because that is a budget study session for City Council. It'll be in this room. Suzanne will be there. Glenn will be there, and I'm going to be out of town. So it looks like a good night to cancel a meeting, so if that's all right. So if we can prepare for the public hearing tonight, if you don't feel comfortable, we can certainly look at another date for a special meeting in between. But it'd be great if we get that done and then actually not have to meet again before the public hearing. So that's the primary thing. The other thing, we have a follow-up on the Buck Center. That was the last issue you dealt with and went to City Council. And then we also talked about looking at just a start at the work program in terms of what are the priorities and kind of how do we ahead. That's going to be directed to a large degree as well by what comes out of City Council in terms of what they're looking at as priorities for not only for themselves and the city, but also for Planning Commission. And then we want to just kind of quickly discuss the handout, which was the parking studies. And have handouts for that as well, so that hard copy. It's a lot of material to go through on a file. That's basically it.
So everybody agree that, well, at this point, we want to cancel the meeting on the 12th?
Yeah.
Provided we get, okay, done? And so that, so hopefully we'll get all of the preparation for the public hearing done tonight, and then that takes us to the follow-up on the Buck Center.
Yeah, if you recall, you had a discussion. I've got copies of the council communication here, so you just kind of see what staff put together for that. As you know, after you have a public hearing and make a recommendation, staff that goes ahead and incorporates that material in their council communication, and council then had a follow-up public hearing. Their public hearing on this issue, which was the approving Littleton Recreation Center PD Plan Amendment number 1 officially, and that was revising the PD plan itself to accommodate a change in property ownership and what that did to the change in terms of parking. That was on July 19th. And so just to kind of see what happened here, I didn't give you all the pages of this because it's about 30 pages long, but I didn't think you wanted all that. It's basically what you've seen in your packets, and then just an update in terms of what came out of Planning Commission. So on page 6, which is the second page on your handout here, conclusion and recommendations, and Planning Commission above that. There's a short report on what Planning Commission recommended, and then conclusion recommendations, including the staff recommendation, and then the action on that, as was taken by City Council, was they did go ahead and approve it as it was proposed. With the staff recommendation, they did not incorporate the recommendation from Planning Commission, which was looking at that parking and the specific requirement for the additional parking. And I think they agreed with staff that that if there is a need for parking, that will be accommodated either by South Suburban and working with the city, and there's some options for that. And so they didn't think that was something they wanted to actually look at changing. So that's kind of went through. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, of course, all those things are on video, and so you go through and either watch it live or in person, or watch it in the past by looking on your computer. And it's sometimes interesting to just kind of watch the discussion, how that did go through the staff presentation as well as the discussion by City Council.
Any comments or concerns? as you guys read it?
My only concern is what we said at the time. This sends a bad message to everybody else. The city's different. We screw up, we can cover our butts. Everybody else, you've got to hew the line. But that was staff and council's decision, so nothing we can do about it.
Any other comments? That was a quick discussion. Are we ready to move on to the preparation for the September 22nd public hearing, evaluating the downtown neighborhood, the draft downtown neighborhood comp plan? Okay.
I put together just some possible material, kind of just get the discussion started at least in terms of how you want to do that. What we've found typically to be most useful is if, in these cases, because it's your plan, if you do as much of the presentation as possible. And if you're comfortable with that, that's kind of where we'd like to head. You've got a two-sided handout. On one side is the preparation for the September 22nd public hearing, public outreach. It talks about kind of how do we get the word out on the plan. And the back side of that, or the other side of that, is format for the public hearing, and it's a possible agenda for that meeting. So we're looking at a 2-hour public hearing, possibly, and how do we do that? So if you want to, we can start with either one of those and kind of talk about, we do have, I don't know if you've noticed, we do have the plan posted on the city's webpage. It's the top article on the front page of the webpage. We also have it posted on Facebook and on Twitter, connections to it. So getting the word out that way. We're going to have additional 85 copies printed, so we'll have hard copies printed this week. And then we're going to get 200 copies of the framework as a handout. So looking at that as a summary, get people's giving them an overview of what the plan says. And those will be printed again this week. And then we'll be sending copies of the full draft to the former planning commissioners. We're looking at a mailing. We're compiling the list from the outreach that you guys did, particularly looking at the interviews that you did and the R5 neighborhood mailing list. So we have those two mailing lists that we can start with and get the word out. And then we're looking at, Linda and I will be going to the September 8th monthly meeting of Hoodlum, which is Historic Downtown Littleton Merchants Association. Anybody else who wants to attend that certainly can. Yes.
On this chart, it's on the 8th. On the upcoming meetings list, it says the 7th. Which is it?
It is Wednesday, whichever that is. So
It'll be the 7th then.
it's the 7th. Okay, sorry.
So it's the 7th instead of the 8th?
Yeah, the 8th. Okay, thank you. And then we're looking at doing a flyer like we did for the neighborhood meeting, where we would actually take that around the R5 particularly and mail it out as well. And then if Jennifer here tonight, she's over at the meet and greet, but we would look at asking her in terms of what the timing, I think, is on when do we want to have articles in newspapers. So typically, I think, in some of these things I put dates on because some things you don't want too far in advance or something like this. You may want it a week out. You may want it more than that. Certainly, they want to have the information available longer than that so they can actually have the plan there. But in terms of actually a notice of the meeting, sometimes a week is as much as people will pay attention to, I think. And that's a discussion, I think, for you guys in terms of what are you comfortable with. If you want to do it sooner, we certainly can. So, yeah, Steve.
How big a crowd are we expecting for that night?
I have no idea. Yeah, we had, what did we have at the open house? We had 100, probably, almost 100 at the open house.
Coming and going.
Yeah, coming and going, I think. And then at the interviews, we had, what did we do, 30 or 40 interviews, I think. The focus groups, probably a total of 25, 30, something like that maybe. If we get all those people, and if we get more, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I typically, if we get 100, I think that'd probably be pretty good. It's tough to get people out. It's a hard thing for people. It's a commitment in the middle of the week is tough no matter what. So.
And we'll hold that here in the council chamber?
Yeah, council chamber. Yeah, be in the council chamber.
And the presentation would be done not from the podium up there or down below?
The thought is from down below, the presentation will be done. I mean, it's not an ideal situation, it's a problem. So I think the thought is be a large part of this would probably be on the screen, so we'd be doing a PowerPoint. And it's you could do it from up above, I suppose, as well.
Can we finish the discussion on the public outreach first and just have some ideas?
Okay.
Sorry,
And then
Jenny.
we go back.
I was also wondering, will an invite card perhaps or something go out to the other board and commissioners? For example, when I was at the board and commissioners dinner, I was talking to someone from the art committee, and they were very interested and curious to see the results of the
Great.
comp plan. And so they were also kind of tracking its progress. So I was just curious if that was something that was
I
on
hadn't
our
thought about that.
radar.
That's a great idea. I'll stick it down. So, yeah, please, come up with anything. That's why I've left empty rows here, so any other ideas would be real helpful. So.
What about, like we discussed in the past, a web comment form?
Yeah, I will talk to Kathy about that again. I know we've talked about that before, and it's possible. We may have to have a link of some sort, but it's possible to do that.
And Jenny, did you have another suggestion?
I have
One
a
of-
question, sorry.
Sorry, Corinne.
I have a question on the flyer. Are those essentially little postcards that are sent? Okay. I think that's too close. Aren't we planning for September 22nd?
But September 22nd, yeah.
So I think we need to,
With the week before,
The week
possibly?
before.
So the 12th?
yeah.
Week of the 12th, okay.
And one thing I noticed is that the existing comp plan is still on the website on the lower right-hand side.
Existing.
The old section on the web.
Oh,
I could
of the
be-
downtown plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. I need to talk to Kathy about that. It's on my list. I haven't done it yet in terms of getting that off or changing that, because what we have on there is a section talking about the update of the downtown plan, but with very old material on it at this point. So is that what was there an actual link to comp plan or to a draft that we done that you saw?
Yeah.
Oh, is there as well? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's still active
Yeah.
until this is passed.
Well,
It should be gone.
well, if you're talking about comp plan itself, the whole comprehensive plan, that should still be on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
It's just a separate section that was detailed, some things we did about a year and a half ago, maybe even longer.
Reflecting
real basic stuff,
new-
the vision,
Right.
and
New
some of that
information,
should be-
but it's not
yeah.
accurate. Okay.
Right. Any other ideas on the public outreach? No?
Is there anything, now, a lot of you did interviews. Would it be a good idea for you to contact the people you interviewed? Would that be helpful? That's probably the most direct in terms of their contact with the plan process to date. If you're willing to do that, I mean, just thoughts about that in terms of how we can do kind of that one-on-one and get people interested in it. Anybody else who wants to come to the Hoodlum meeting? The thought there is it's a pretty quick kind of overview in terms of here's what we're doing, please come. So Linda and I'll be there, but we're certainly glad to have anybody else who wants to come as well. So.
Will you have copies for the hoodlum members?
I have copies of the framework, yeah, so, and then the rest of it on links. And then Glenn did a presentation at the downtown retailers meeting last week at the breakfast, so.
Right. They seem to be very energized about it.
Good.
And, interested, so it'd be interesting to compare it to your Woodland meeting.
Yeah,
And see if you get the same reaction.
we will,
So,
yeah,
They were excited about it.
good.
And Dennis and I went to the Historical Preservation Board, and like we said in an email to everybody, they were very excited and very pleased with the draft. So it's good to hear very positive sayings.
I think that's probably a good idea, is to do specific invitations maybe to the, fairly early to the folks who were at the breakfast and heard Glenn's presentation. Maybe we can get them to help spread the word a little bit too, so maybe something like that.
Well, my concern about talking with the people that we talked with before is that we've got 3 members that are no longer part of the Planning Commission.
True.
And they talk to a number of people, so to me, it's almost better to have
Okay,
you guys contact them.
okay.
I mean, I'd be happy to contact the people I worked with, but
Or again, if you just include them as, a special invite for them because they've contributed in the past.
Yes.
So that could, just like we're sending it out, an invitation to the other board members, et cetera, combine them all in that one group.
I'm sorry.
So maybe instead of, directly reaching out to them by phone or otherwise, just a special invitation in particular to them.
Okay.
Just like we are doing for the board.
And we do have that, actually, yeah, that's one of our lists that we're doing, so with the mailing list, so Doreen has actually downloaded that, so that we will be doing that, so.
Is the intent of this public outreach to encourage people to attend the public meeting, or are we looking to solicit information even prior to the meeting?
I think to attend the public hearing primarily, because that's where you're all going to hear it. I think we'll also encourage people to send in written comment. You really need to have, by the time you close that public hearing, you need to have all the comment. So you can't accept anything beyond that. If you get somebody commenting afterwards, officially, you're done at that point. So public hearing is closed, information is intact. Is that correct? Do we need to be that strict?
Well, I anticipate after you close the public hearing, when are you going to adopt it or vote on
When we
that?
get to 26th, the following Monday is when we consider the action on it. So
That's for city council.
no, that's for planning commission. 26th.
Okay. So, I mean, it's a legislative process. I think, so for that reason, you can certainly take input beforehand. You can talk to people about it. It's not like your quasi-judicial hearings where the only evidence you can consider is primarily at the hearing. So you can take that input before. I think you just need to decide if that's the cutoff point where you're not going to take public input anymore, then you just need to advise people that, you know, once tonight is over, we're not going to consider anything further. If you want to consider things further, then you can say, if you have further comments, please get them. I mean, because it's legislative and because you're not actually going to vote until the 26th, there is that time period where you could. I think it's just a fairness issue that you need to advise people one way or the other.
So, Suzanne, as long as any comments that come in after the hearing, either to staff or to us, we funnel through Dennis and we have it the evening we're going to talk about it, you know, it's really parallel with what we do with normal applications and hearings. The only problem with that is it's going to be tough enough to get all of those comments from the hearing consolidated into a form that we can look at and say, yeah, we need to consider that as we forward it to City Council. If things are still coming in at the last minute, it's going to make that even tougher.
Well, and that's why, you know, legally you could do it either way, but I think you just as a commission need to decide which way you want to do it so that you can tell the audience and have a process in mind, just like when we had people come and talk at study sessions and we had that discussion, should we allow that or not. Legally you can do it either way. You just want to give the public notice so that somebody doesn't find out later, hey, they were taking comments and I would have sent something in, but I didn't know.
So tell everybody the deadline is the hearing. If somebody comes up with some brilliant, you know, we're all slapping our heads saying, why didn't we think of that? We still have time to incorporate it. But don't invite an onslaught at the last minute.
But if you're going to consider it, then, you know,
You can't.
tell people in advance that you're going to consider comments.
The other thought on that, I think, is that one of the things we typically do is we provide comment cards as well, because some people aren't comfortable getting up and speaking, you know, not only in front of a crowd, but also on television. So we have the comment cards. You anticipate those all be taken out and turned back in the night of the public hearing. That's the norm, but you can go either way on that as well.
But if we tell them the deadline is the 22nd, I think we've got to stick to it. So do we need to get a formal motion?
I mean, I think as a board, you need to decide how you want to do that so you can present it the night of the hearing.
So do we?
Before we go forward with that motion, can I get an understanding of what are all of the ways someone can comment prior to or at the, so at the public hearing, I heard there will be comment cards and you can also speak at the public hearing. Prior to that,
Letters to the
They can send a
commission,
letter?
that they send in, directed to you, Linda particularly. And we give them an address, you know, that comes to us.
email,
Email, they can do as well, again. And I gave them, on the website, for example, there's a little introduction that says, it gives our address and also email address. Please forward comments to Linda Newfinky, care of us, and then also if they have questions, they can call or email me and ask questions, but comments actually go to you guys. So, and then we're also going to look at the web comments too.
Remembering that we will also get comments as a result of the city council hearing. So all of which are going to have to be filtered and sorted out and decided what.
Yeah, the way we're looking at it again, because I think it's a good point, is that what you will do is you'll have a public hearing. You'll put together your motion, which will include the changes that you would anticipate. You will not see a change in this draft, the draft will go forward as is, so everybody has the same draft going forward to the city council public hearing. And then with that public hearing, they will have your motion, which will include basically your public comment, which is your public comment, your recommendation. When you adopted it, it said, here are the things that we saw that need to be changed. And that goes in, and they consider that. And then they make their motion, and they decide what they want to keep or change as part of that. And they could take some of yours, not take some of yours, but hopefully the easiest thing is if they take all of yours, they're ratifying what you've done. And then and then hopefully they've done it. And if there are changes that you guys need to consider, then we'll have to think about, if we come back to you, what do we do at that point? So.
And they will probably again take public comment. So that is somebody's additional opportunity if they miss a deadline that you all set.
And the comment, so we've already received a comment from the Historic Preservation Board and the comments from some of these other organizations, like the Downtown Littleton Merchants. Again, it'll be through this process of you guys presenting to them. That's when you're getting the comment, or that in addition to if they come to the public hearing?
No, actually, we're going to encourage them to come because our being there wouldn't be as effective, I don't think. I mean, they certainly could give it to us, but it'd be much more effective if they give it to us in writing, or give it to you in writing, or come to the public hearing.
It also gives us a chance to read reaction from everybody else who's there. If somebody brings up a comment, even though they had expressed it to Linda and Dennis a couple weeks before, and the rest of the crowd says, oh, yeah, or what in the heck are you talking about? It gives us a chance to weigh it, which has been kind of lacking previously.
The Historic Preservation Board, for example, will have somebody at the public hearing present their recommendation.
Okay.
And this is unusual, again, in that you actually adopt the plan, and City Council ratifies it. So it's a secondary adoption, but you have the official right to adopt, but they also ratify. So it's unique. So.
If we solicit written comments, though, on Thursday night, staff is going to have to turn those around and get them to us on Friday,
right, so
that we can review them and be able to discuss that on Monday night, 48 hours.
A lot of fast typing.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, how we do that. So.
I don't know that we want to solicit anything after Thursday night, having other letters or any other comment.
And we may not actually get them out to you. We may only have them on Monday, I mean, realistically.
Which
where
I
you've
don't
heard
get
them
those
all.
emails until.
Yeah. So you've heard them all, and Monday night we have the list, and you can go through it just as a checklist, almost a kind of reminder of what you heard. But I think if you can all take your own notes in terms of what you're hearing, what strikes you.
But if they're written comments, they put them on a note card and hand them in after the meeting.
Right.
There's no way to get them until.
That's correct, absolutely. You bet. That's correct. Typically, we don't get a lot of those. We typically get more people speaking than we get written comments. We'll have a few people that are more comfortable doing that. So, we got quite at the open house. We got a lot of written comments, but that was one of the things we were encouraging. I think was the written comments.
Did you say you were going to try to do something with the website so that there'd be comments directly on
We're
the
going
website?
I'm going to talk to Kathy about it and see if we've got the capability of doing that. So.
Okay, and also under outreach, where you have flyer, it says it'll be delivered. Would that also be posted anywhere?
It would be posted, but it'd be. I'm speaking specifically about the R5 as who we're delivering to. Yeah, just because that's kind of a unique group. Whereas we've got pretty good representation, I think, from the property owners, the business owners, and the other groups that we have, the list that we have for the mailings. And we have a mailing for these as well, but it just seems like maybe, and I guess that's.
I'm thinking if you post it at the Buck Center and the Town Hall Arts Center and some of the public civic places that people might see it, that might not pick it up in the newspaper or whatever.
Perhaps to council to distribute through their email lists, or Tom Christopite and his group.
Good.
I'm sure he's got an email list.
Good.
I'm going to strongly recommend everybody take notes on what strike you as highlights in the comments. For those of you who weren't here 2 years ago, what we ended up with is a list of comments. We had no idea whether this was one voice out of the 100, or 20 or 30 people, or everybody, and we could rely on nothing but our own memories as to what kind of weight to give to each of the comments.
Yeah, because And when we take down the notes, we're not going to say, well, it was, you know, it would be very subjective of us, I think, to say, you know, it seemed like there was a groundswell on this, or so that's really up to you guys to kind of read that, I think, and see what you hear, what you're reacting to. So that's where it really comes in.
So do we have a motion to complete the public hearing by a certain date? I mean, not to complete, the complete comments.
I motion that the comments be completed by the end of the public hearing.
Second.
Well, end of the public hearing, you mean on the 22nd?
Yes, on the 22nd.
We wouldn't have any time to, if we're still receiving comments by that time, we wouldn't have any time to review them.
Dennis made plain we're not going to anyway until Monday night.
But if they complete their cards, we should have them.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, I'm going to pick up on what Kurt's saying is, we're saying we're cutting it off Thursday night so that we can have them, consolidate them, review them, but we aren't going to see them until Monday night, so why not just continue to take comments up to Monday night? If nothing's going to happen with them, to give the rest of us a chance to see them between Thursday and Monday night, then why not continue to accept them through Monday night?
Because if we're accepting them at 6 o'clock on Monday night, you're still not going to see them.
That's right.
Because we won't have a chance to even put them on a list at that point. We need some time to at least get them on a list.
I think considering that we provided ample opportunity to provide comment beforehand, and then we have the public hearing as well, I think that gives the public plenty of time to provide their feedback.
I would also suggest that at the public hearing, we make it clear that they will have another opportunity for public comment prior to the city council hearing.
Again, that is true. I really would hope that we'd really focus on your hearing, your public hearing, because the cleaner we get a response at that, so people come and really focus on the public hearing. This is my take on it, at least. At Planning Commission, because you're adopting it initially, yes, put comments before City Council as well, but to come up with something totally new at City Council is going to really put you in a position where you're having to go back and reconsider things that you really hadn't heard yourselves. It's just, it seems tougher to me, but I'd really, again, this is a bizarre one because you have two public hearings with two adoptions. But I guess the cleaner you can get your recommendations, and so if what goes forward to City Council is kind of repeating what they're going to hear as well, that'd be the ideal in my mind. But
the adoption, I guess, in essence, Suzanne, would have to be a public. We'd have to take input, or would it not?
The council's a ratification, or this?
Planning Commission's approval adoption.
It has to be done at a public hearing.
we can do it. We're doing it as a resolution, so we don't have to do it
At council.
at council.
At council,
Right.
it'll be by resolution, but I would imagine, as they've done in the past, they'll slate this for public comment.
Glenn, are you asking Suzanne if, since legally it has to be an action at a public meeting or public hearing, we have to reopen the public hearing Monday night before we vote on it?
Yeah, that's my question. Right. Because I tend to side with Dennis. I mean, when you have a final draft here, at a certain point, you have to kind of cut off comment. And if we put all together, we put all the effort into a September 22nd public meeting, and we have good turnout, and we have a lot of people have invested the time to show up to that meeting. We've compiled all those comments, and we give you all their well-thought-out ideas. To have somebody show up then and turn the whole process on its ear, I would be concerned about.
Suzanne, could we get around that by making Thursday night's meeting a formal meeting and public hearing, and then at the end of that, as a commission, vote to close the public hearing, and then we'll consider it on Monday night?
Right, and then you would just
Okay.
continue it,
Right.
your decision until Monday night.
So Monday, then, yeah, we're scheduling Monday as a regular meeting as well, so both will be regular meetings at which you'll have the public hearing and then make the formal decision, so.
So how will it work? I will be at the 22nd meeting, but I probably will not be at the 26th. how will that work with one of the commissioners being present during the initial part of the public hearing, but not the second part?
Well, as long as one of the alternates is present for the first part, then they'll vote in your place at the second part. Although, what do we say about comp plan? Isn't there something special in the rules about?
Alternates cannot vote, I think. Well, you can vote if they step up.
Right.
They
Right.
step up to be regular.
They participate in all discussion about comp plan, but then they don't vote.
They
Okay.
don't vote at the final unless they're stepped into.
Right. So an alternate would step into your place,
So they can step in during the public hearing?
provided they were there for all the testimony.
The question, I guess, would be how would the commissioner then get his or her input into, the final decision, I think, too, is the other question. Present that, if you could write something up as your position, probably the cleanest, I would think, and have it for the meeting on Monday, on the 26th.
Like your priorities particularly.
Yeah.
What were
Yeah.
the most important things that you heard
It's not a
during?
part of the vote, but at least it's out there for the
Right.
discussion.
Or you could give an opportunity, I don't know if you'd have your thoughts ready, but you could close the public hearing and you could have an opportunity to give your thoughts to the commissioners and then continue it till that Monday.
That means we need to make sure Matt's at both meetings. No?
All right, we have a motion on the table to provide comments completed by the end of the hearing on the 22nd of September. And we have a second on that. Are we ready to vote on that? Okay, all those in favor? And that is everybody? That's unanimous? So then, do we want to continue with talking about the format and how we're,
That'd be my hope, is to talk about kind of what the presentation looks like itself, and that's on the backside. Typically, we're scheduled for a couple hours. Again, that's kind of 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. Is kind of people's endurance, I think, for something like this. And we can put stuff up on the walls and have the room open a little early so people can come in and see. And I wrote down the things we could have some of the framework maps blown up. The height map, the downtown parking map, the historic district map, just as discussion points, and then have members of the commission kind of stationed around with each of those to kind of talk about here. And we could have key issues on the list next to those, or some key recommendations for each of those. Refer to them, and then go into at 7:15 possibly, or maybe 7 if you feel you need a full hour. Then we can go into opening up the meeting and have an introduction. It kind of goes through the format of the plan, basically, is the way I've got it structured, because I think that flows pretty well. It helps you kind of relate to the plan in terms of how it works. If they've looked at it, start off with an introduction, both the purpose and how to use the plan and what the boundaries of the study area are, that discussion, and then get into the vision, the framework, and the planning principles. And then not all the goals, all the policies on the implementation, but it'd be good if tonight even we could go through and start identifying what you think are key. Which ones are the big ones you want to talk about. Suzanne's eyes are rolling.
What?
You're on. And then comments and questions open up for how long do you want to have actual comments and questions. I've got an hour and 10 minutes right now for people to make comments, and that's both verbal comments as well, writing on their cards, and then a wrap-up at 8:55 and reiteration of the process that following this, you're going to be meeting on Monday the 26th, and then it goes on to City Council for a public hearing there. So that kind of wrap-up. And what I'm hoping is that we can think about, first of all, is this the kind of format that you think works? And also, are there those of you who would be willing to take on roles as part of this? Yeah, Steve?
How much time will the people have to speak?
I think that's a good question. Typically, 2 to 4 minutes 2 to 3 minutes is even a lot of time when you really think about it, how much you need to get. And that's kind of standard if you think about it. If you have 100 people and we have we have 70 minutes. That's what? Not much time.
25 people got to talk.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, if you want to make it shorter, I mean, at some point, I think we do realize what we experience is we start hearing a lot of the same comments. So there's some key things people probably will be thinking, in similar veins, and you'll hear that. But to some degree, it's good for you to hear repetition on it too, so you kind of get that sense of magnitude. How big a concern is this? Are there a lot of people that are concerned with this? But I think I'm open completely.
Do we say in our rules, because council has formed it, do we
Yeah,
say the planning commission?
I don't think we do.
No? Okay.
If we had 100 people, I doubt that 25% of them would want to talk. Probably more like 10%. So we might get 10 people commenting for 2 to 3 minutes.
And we could probably help that along if we advise them up front. If they find during the course of the wandering around discussing everything that half a dozen of them have pretty much the same take on something, then get together as a group, decide who's going to speak, let them use the 3 minutes, and get it said with the backup there in front of them. That'll give us the same feeling for support for the idea.
Well, and usually, I think in the council rules, if you're speaking for a group, you get 10 minutes or 15, or it's a little bit different. So if the downtown merchants or if HPB or people like that want to assign somebody, they may have a lot of points they want to make, and it would still be more efficient to have it done through one speaker. You could do that.
On the other hand,
How can we identify those groups? So HPB, downtown merchants, what are some of the other groups that we would want to try to at least categorize or
What we
introduce?
identify as we're going through the outreach, we also had downtown property owners, downtown retailers, downtown residents. Those were the kind of the key groups that we were looking at. The only one that's really organized per se is Hoodlum, which is primarily retailers. It does have some property owners in it. The residents, we could certainly indicate that perhaps on a flyer that, or I don't know how we do that, but we could think about that. Typically, they're self-identifying. Often people will say, I'm speaking for, and so they'll get up and self-identify, and I've seen where they actually say, I've got time from these people. So all those people have signed up. They may have 5 or 6 people signed up, and they get their time to a maximum of 10 minutes or whatever it might be. But the other people that do not get to speak because their time has been given up, so they kind of self-identify.
I'd hate to see a half a dozen organized groups take 10 minutes or even half of that and thereby take out more than half of the time for public comment. That leaves no time for individuals. It says something that we don't want to say to the community as to who's important. Most of these groups, like Hoodlum or HPB, have had ample time, or will have had ample time to discuss this, come up with an organized reaction to it, present it to us. I'd rather hear from individuals that night than give extended amounts of time to the groups that have other avenues for conveying those
Then
messages
I think
to us.
your follow-up question is then, or issue is, do you want to allow one person to yield their time to another person? Because that becomes very complicated to track. So you may want to announce up front if you're not going to, everybody's allowed 3 minutes. We're not allowing yielding of time, or however you want to phrase that.
But you stated we have no rules around time.
That's what,
I don't remember seeing any rules for us. I know City Council does. I think you can set your own rules in terms of what seems practical, and what's going to work in terms of the number of speakers and what's effective.
Maybe we need to set a couple of criteria up front and then just tell them we're going to be flexible. We're going to see how many people want to speak. If only 10 or 12 people want to speak, or 10 or 15, then fine. Take your 4 or 5 minutes, whatever, we can fit it in, we're fine. But if you have a whole crowd plus 3 organizations that have a long laundry list of things they want to say, we may have to be a little more constraining in order to give everybody at least a fair hearing.
We will have a sign-up sheet, or multiple sign-up sheets, so you can get a sense of who is interested. And typically, not everybody signs up. So if you watch the mayor go through a typical public hearing, he'll say, is there anyone else who wants to speak? And so, and gives that opportunity if there's time.
For that matter, if we give everybody, say, 3 minutes, and all the people who signed up or said they wanted to speak have used their 3 minutes, and they've sat down, and we still have 15 minutes left, we can say, anybody have anything else they want to add or elaborate?
I would prefer something like that than to, for someone to say, okay, I cede my minutes to that, because it's just going to be very hard to manage through that.
So, Dave, do you want to make a motion to that effect?
Yeah, I move that we limit verbal comments to 3 minutes, and then offer opportunities for extended comments if we still have time left over.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
What about the ceding the time to somebody else?
No, it's 3 minutes to speak. I mean, if they want to stand there and say there are 5 of us who believe the same thing, and he's going to speak for us, but the whole idea is to try and give everybody a chance to speak, not to try and come up with a system where people can barter for time and end up talking for half an hour. I don't want to sit through that. I don't think anybody else does. I don't think we're going to get from the process what we're looking for if somebody hogs the microphone for 30 minutes.
The other thing organized groups will do is they'll break their presentations down into smaller groups, so 3-minute bites in terms of someone will take a couple of comments, someone will take a few more. So if they know in advance, it's something we didn't publicize probably in terms of how we're going to do this, so they have a sense of how we're going to do it.
Okay, are we ready to vote? All right, all those in favor? That is unanimous.
And it's both parts of that, no seating and also 3-minute with extended time.
How do we manage the time?
You're a timekeeper.
Yeah, no?
Oh, I don't mind. I'm just saying, should we appoint that now and make that decision so that we're prepared when we go in?
Do you have a stopwatch? Or
Kelly's got a magic box that,
Well, I think we can do it.
do you have an egg timer?
There's a timer, isn't there, on,
I've just never seen him use it,
I
but
haven't seen him use it either.
Green light?
Yeah, the green light,
They
I'm sure
used
it
to
works.
use it.
I don't know if it still works, but we need to find out.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him use it.
Ask Jim Taylor. He ought to know all
Yeah,
about that.
on the Walmart hearings.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that, Jim.
That's right.
it's a little intimidating to speak in front of the red, green, and yellow lights.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there a yellow light? 'Cause- oh, okay. So at 30 seconds, you put up the yellow light?
It didn't seem to actually keep track of time very well either, because some people got red light a little bit quicker than others, it seemed.
And even when you're scrupulous about it, somebody inevitably is going to say, "You're cutting me off. That's rude." Whatever.
We may need to have a timekeeper. We can come up with a timekeeper.
Okay, so the city will have a timekeeper.
Yeah, it looks like Tony will not be available probably. I don't think he's going to be back with us for the public hearing. So.
Should we, with this format for the public hearing, should we just break it down and talk about various components here? Like, say, for example, the 6:45 to 7:15 timeframe. I mean, what do you guys think of that? I mean, to have people gather before the meeting to look at.
So is that going to happen in this room, or, so what I'm envisioning here, or what I'm understanding is there's boards up.
Yeah,
Will it be there?
kind of in the corners. This
Oh,
is
okay.
what I'm thinking at this point.
Okay.
So we would just have boards up on easels in the 4 corners. That back corner is actually kind of dangerous. We'll probably just use the 3 because I always kind of feel like I'm going to back off and fall off the edge. But the other 3 are fairly safe feeling. So.
Can I suggest we add something to the graphics we have out there? Could we
Wait,
put?
can we talk the timeframe first to see whether we agree from 6:45 to 7:15 and starting 15 minutes kind of after?
Well, it says the meeting starts at 7. Are we going to start at 7 or 6:45? Or are we just going to have open milling around from 6:45
That was
to
my thought, just the
7:15?
people who show up early, yeah.
There's really no presentation going on at that point? We're not talking about anything?
That's the way it's structured right now. But if you want to start right at 7, a lot of people, we've found it both ways, where people get real involved in those conversations. Sometimes, they don't. So it's better, they're anxious to get the whole thing going and just start right at 7. We've seen it both ways.
I think we had this discussion 2.5 years ago. Do we just let them in and start talking, or do we at least make some 60-second statement as to, here's how we're going to do this tonight in general, so they at least know what's coming at them?
Right. If you're going to do that,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, and we're planning, the proposal is to do something like that at 7:15.
Or
What about
or
at
Dave is
7?
saying, yeah, it's
I'm
7.
thinking it's 7. I mean, if they're telling the meeting starts at 7,
We should
some will
start.
start coming in at 6:45, but at 7 o'clock, make a statement that says, feel free to mill around, look at these easels that we have up, and then we'll start it
I
with
guess the question is,
information
how much value do you see in that? You know, when you look at just the list of what we've got, the framework map, are people going to have a good enough sense, you think, from, you know, perhaps having a chance to look, hopefully having a chance to look at the plan online before?
And they'll also have a copy, or they can pick up a...
Typically, we're not going to
hard
print a
copy.
lot of hard copies. We're going to have the framework copies, but we won't have a lot of these until it's actually finalized.
Some of those exhibits are going to generate more interest and comments than others, but I would think somebody coming in anywhere around 7, by 7:15, they'll have had enough time to walk around and say, what in the heck do they mean by that? Or, is this really going to work? That should be all that they need.
So at 7 o'clock, we have some kind of welcome, here's what we're proposing. Some of you are already doing this. We encourage you to do this for the next 15 minutes, and we'll meet. Steve, I'm sorry.
The comments that are made between 6:45 and, I don't know if the meeting, up until the public hearing starts are not to be used as far as the public hearing, correct?
Well, you can use them. It would just be, I think, better to share them with everybody.
And you may have somebody showing up early or at 7 o'clock saying, look, I want to look around real quick, but I don't have time to stay. You have a comment card, I have a couple things I want to write down, and they're gone. I mean, we had that the last time. People were coming and going.
So do we agree to start at 7 o'clock?
I'm a little, I want to understand a little bit better Steve's comment here. So if I'm standing at a board and someone makes a comment to me, and it's after 7 o'clock, or even actually before that, for that matter, because we are accepting comments beforehand, then is it my responsibility to share with the group what that comment was?
No, I think that it would just be best if at that point you said, would you mind filling out the comment card so that this can be noted for everyone in the group? You don't have a responsibility to do it, and again, because it's legislative, you can come in predetermined, you can, have discussions outside the meeting, consider things, outside the presentations, just as you have when you've driven around and done your studies. My point is that just a person who's standing there discussing it with you may believe that's what's going to happen anyway. And so, at that point, it would probably be best to say, you have a really great comment, in order to get it to the group, are you planning to speak tonight, or would you fill out a comment card or that kind of thing?
Yeah, and so I think you encourage them to speak or fill out a comment card. I think either one.
Okay.
And if not, I guess my thought is you listen through the public hearing. If you haven't heard their comment, then I think maybe you just take note of it, that you heard it somehow.
Okay.
So the point of the second section of this is going to be a structured presentation by us to them. Okay, it's not further circulating around and exchanging.
My thought is the second part is really a structured presentation, so you kind of hit the highlights. So in case they've read it but need more clarification, or they haven't had an opportunity to really look at it, but again, it's kind of your view, and particularly when you get into the kind of the key things, what are the key implementation strategies and the key goals and policies that you see. I think that's real helpful.
Well, and I think to respect people's time, we really should start at 7 on the dot, and not, because if that's what we're publicizing, we want to take advantage of everybody's time.
So you're saying, Linda, you want to start the actual presentation at 7? Mm-hmm. Okay, so 6:45 to 7 would be just an opportunity.
No,
I don't think that's
would
what she's
say no.
saying.
I don't know what she's saying.
Okay.
I would say we would make an announcement to continue looking at the information we've distributed around the room, and then tell them we're going to start at 7:15.
So at 7 o'clock, we do a welcome, basically.
Exactly.
And kind of here's
Welcome,
the
look
15
around.
minutes.
If they don't have
please
time
look
to
at
stay till 7:30, ask them to
Okay.
write a comment
Good.
and leave.
it. Okay, great.
Well, and my comment is that I really think with gathering at 6:45, going through all the frameworks and everything just might be a little bit confusing to people. And whereas once they get it through the presentation, what concepts we're trying to address, I think that might be more effective than having all of that available in advance. I don't know what you guys think.
The problem is that we're then saying, okay, you can make your comments on the comment cards as you're walking around between 7 and 7:15, or 6:45 and 7:15, whatever. And then we're giving them the presentation, okay? And it's likely that they're going to have more questions are going to come to mind after they've heard the presentation than just walking around looking at a couple of cold maps. So, and then we're saying, well, you have no time to sit there and talk about it with anybody else or ask for clarification from any of the commissioners. It's just, okay, we finished our presentation, time for you to come up, step up to the mic and make comments. I think maybe we're getting the cart before the horse, in my opinion.
My suggestion is we would start whenever, 6:45, have us all, or several of us standing at the front door and explain to them as they come in. Take some time, walk around the room. If you have comments, write them down, speak to anyone here. We're going to start this meeting at 7:15.
With that, then, whatever we're presenting within the room then should be a handout for them as well to refer back to, right? So if they saw something in the corner, that they have it in hand as well, so that helps them to formulate their thoughts, et cetera. So whatever we're presenting on a big board, I think should be a handout for them as well.
Okay.
For those that, again, don't have the opportunity to walk around.
Okay, so if we have the framework, for example, we have the height map, the downtown parking map, the historic district map, if those are our graphics, then we've got a handout that includes all those. Yeah.
You're going to do a PowerPoint on those? And
That's
so
the
you
thought
can
is
do-
the presentation
Can
will
you
be
just do that
PowerPoint.
PowerPoint with the comments where the people can write their comments beside them on the printout?
We can do that too, yeah.
Can we talk about what these 6 items are? Are they the appropriate 6 items? Anything we want to add or delete?
Can we get an agreement on the
Time.
the timeframes?
The only reason I'm wanting to understand this better, so if it's only 3 at the end, maybe we don't need half an hour. If it ends up being 10, then maybe we need more than half an hour. So I think I would prefer that we take a look at what is the content we're presenting and then come back and decide, yeah, that's more than enough time or otherwise.
Work for everyone? Okay, so let's do that. To talk about the, what the contents of the.
PowerPoint will be?
Or the
first
frameworks
section.
and all of these.
Okay. So you're talking 7:15 to 7:45?
Yeah.
Okay, great. It's basically, what I was thinking was pretty much directly out of the plan, that the introduction really talks about what's the purpose of the plan. And so it's kind of it's a summary of what's in here. What's the purpose of the plan, how to use the plan.
No, Dennis, I'm talking about this first section where you talk about framework, map number 4.
Okay. I was wondering, okay.
Okay, sorry.
That might be it. So framework map, we've got 3 different sets of maps. We've got, so what I was doing was just kind of taking a rough break in terms of where do we have some kind of maybe significant point where we combine maps, these different sheets, and come up with something you could actually talk about and see something kind of distinct. So I was taking, for example, map number 4, which is the residential mixed-use district, shows you at that point you will have included the downtown, the boundaries, the Main Street spine, the iconic structures, the Main Street district, and the old downtown neighborhood, and the residential mixed-use districts. So you'll have all that on the framework. So you can talk about all those things. So if you've got somebody in front of you who's looking at that and say, well, what this is we've got the Main Street spine that we really identified as kind of the key, point in what people visualize when they look at downtown. Here are the boundaries. You can kind of point out what the boundaries are. Here's the railroad. Here's Santa Fe. So just kind of help them go through and understand what the context is and what we've been looking at. And then how you guys went through and said, in our mind, we see multiple districts kind of evolving over time that are distinct. And so we've got the Main Street district, which we talk about from the north of Maine going south. We've got the R5 neighborhood, the old downtown neighborhood, and then we've got the mixed-use neighborhoods. So you talk about all those things as well as the iconic structures. So that's what I'm thinking. And then the next one would be map number 7, where suddenly you've added government and education facilities. You've talked about the industrial, and you've added the parks, trails, and open space. So again, it's kind of how these all start working together. So, and then the last one is the framework itself, which adds circulation network into it and is everything put together. So it's got all those different features. So that was my thought, is that rather than just having the framework as a single map that we've got presenting, you might want to kind of have those as at least in phases. Yeah, it's 3 phases is what I was thinking, but I'm totally open. If you want to just have the one framework map and talk about that and what it means, we can certainly do that too. The second one was the height map, and I think that, because that's such a significant recommendation of the plan in terms of maximum heights, building heights for structures, I think that's an important one to have, and then to have key policies that are associated with that height. You've got one, basically, that talks about this is the maximum height.
Where is the height map?
The height map,
16.
page 16. So that we'd blow that up, we'd have it on a board, and it would be on an easel. And then the next one is the downtown parking map, and that leads more, not that that provides a solution or even what you're talking about in terms of doing a program, parking program, but it starts to kind of focus the discussion a little bit in terms of, here's what we're looking at, and it's just, this is existing condition, and we're going to look at, how do we actually review the parking program, which talks about what's the appropriate zoning requirement for parking, and how do we manage existing parking, and how we provide for future needs. So it's that kind of discussion that goes on with that. And then the last one, the historic district map. And again, this is kind of what we've got in terms of graphics, is kind of where we're heading. They may not be the key things, but I think it is a discussion in terms of historic character downtown and how that's such a is kind of a key recommendation throughout the plan. It's in the vision, it's everywhere along. That's what we're trying to do, is maintain that historic character. Dave?
I've got 2 comments. One on the framework maps and that sort of thing. I'm not real sure why 4 and 7 would be singled out as opposed to 2 talking about the Main Street district.
Okay.
Didn't we have a graphic at one point with all of those individual components on a single board and then leading to the overall framework?
Isn't that the overall Littleton framework, page 9?
Well, yeah, but at one point we had a board that had
all
each
of
of those, the other 8 components showing the progression.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And then the final. So could we just put that up there?
We could have that and have it just one,
Right.
one set, progression. So everybody's got that. We may have it in a couple of places around the room.
I like that suggestion.
Okay.
Then the other comment was, if we're going to do the height map and policies, would we not gain something by having the current zoning map right there beside it? It's the same outline, the same areas, and it shows how height and zoning, how the proposed height limitations and the current zoning aligns.
Good.
Sooner or later, somebody's going to ask, well, how's this area zoned, or my property's over here, what zone, how is it zoned next to it? We've got it right there.
In the height map area, is there a way to do, just for illustrative purposes, the height of, say, the mill, or height of a couple of the iconic structures around, or approximate heights of these structures, so people get a better idea of what 50 feet is and 60, 40?
All we have to do is decide on the height of the mill. 66 feet or 84 feet.
We've never decided on the height of the mill.
No, we haven't.
It's somewhere up there. We know it's tall.
One of my concerns too is that this is a public hearing and it's not really an open house. So the more that we have open housey type things, the less people are going to be focused on what their comments are.
And yet, at a typical hearing, we have information up at the top, at the door when they come in, so they have a chance to go through or orient themselves on what the application is, what the issues are, what staff recommendations are. So what we're talking about doing here in that opening 15 minutes is no different.
So when we look at the height map and the downtown parking, that has contributed to our overall thinking and the recommendation we have here. So that's why we believe that's an important one to share. Regarding the historic district map, is that one necessary? That's more informational,
I think
right?
it's very, and I put that on there, but I kind of have the same thought, that it is so specific in such a detail in so many ways, that even though it's kind of an underlying principle for what you're looking at, the plan, I'm not sure that's the thing that addresses that. So
It's more a presentation of what we've got right now.
right.
Right. So I do see the value of the height map and the downtown parking. I expect those have been a lot of where the interest maybe has been in the past and even continues to be in the present.
Okay.
So I do see value to those being represented to give people just information. But I hear your point, Linda, this isn't just an open house. But I do think these two will ground people into our thinking and our recommendations. So when we do come back to the presentation, we can refer to them again.
And they will have the framework. That's a handout.
That's
that we
right.
have. And
That's
then
right.
we'll have, then we can have the height map as well. So, okay, and the downtown parking map. We have those two things.
So does Steve?
I would agree with Dave on the having a zoning map out too.
Okay, good.
So what I'm hearing is that the framework provide the progression, and with the height maps and policies, provide the current zoning maps, and then keep the downtown parking map and exclude the historic district map. What do you guys think?
I have one more clarification. What would policies be? So I see the height map. What's policy? What would the policy information look like?
There's basically one policy that relates to height, and basically, and it's kind of at the bottom there, which says, we're going to incorporate a maximum height into the design standards and guidelines.
Okay.
So, and then that's going to provide guidance as you go through the process.
On the bottom of page 15.
It starts getting a little complex in terms of what processes are and all those things, but I think if we kind of keep the discussion fairly simple in terms of, as you go through the process, this is the maximum height that probably covers.
Most of the other elements, the sections that we talk about in goals, policies, and implementation strategies are going to show up on the framework or a height map, whatever, parking map. The only thing it doesn't have a graphic is the historic considerations, and that doesn't show up anywhere in the framework. So I would think having the historic district map there at least as a reference to say, okay, this is what the district is now, these are the properties, so somebody has some idea. Are we talking 6 properties? Are we talking 40 properties? How far does this extend? At least the graphic is to provide a focal point or an orientation, and I think that does it.
You probably already have that graphic already made up.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That it wouldn't be.
No, absolutely.
If it saves us even one question about, what is the historic district?
I mean, that will probably be part of the discussion too, I think, the presentation, because that is such a key thing for us. So I would anticipate that be part of the PowerPoint. So they will have that as part of the handout. They'll have that slide. So they can have it that way too. So we can have it either on an easel or not on an easel, but just in the handout.
So it's interesting. We keep going back and forth. So what happens first? Do we come up with a presentation? And then from there, make sure we pull out those areas that we are going to focus on, or so I think we have to get some clarity amongst ourselves. So, we're not going to be able to talk about everything. So what are the 3 key or 4, whatever it may be, that we're going to explicitly call out in the presentation? Therefore, we want to ensure individuals have had an opportunity, or we provided them yet another opportunity by having that available to them.
So what you're proposing is to discuss the actual presentation and then go back to
Check.
seeing whether we've got the right graphics or not.
You can do it either way. You can say, here are the graphics, and then that's going to drive your presentation. And so, it sounds like you guys have already done some presentations. So what have you guys found has been the highlights, or what are the key points that are coming out from the presentations already done or being prepared for Historic Preservation Board?
The highlights have been, this is good.
I don't think we need to limit ourselves and say, well, the graphics that we show up front are the graphics in the presentation. We're using the graphics up front for orientation, giving people some idea of the major elements of the plan, something they can look at, not just read through and try and digest in terms of text. All I was saying was leave the historic district map there. That's the only element that isn't, only section of our plan that isn't covered in the framework. So it's just a graphic. It's a reminder. It's something for people to latch onto. The graphics that come through the PowerPoint presentation and the actual presentation may incorporate some of those. If they have to for reference, may not. There may be supplemental graphics that you need to show instead. But we're talking about that first 15 minutes, just orientation, give people a chance to see what it is we're talking about in terms of where and what. I don't know. We have to talk about them separately.
Steve? Do we,
What I'm handing out now is just what's out of the plan. It's the 2 pages of implementation summary. So I think when we get to that discussion that Corinne was just talking about in terms of the key goals, policy, and implementation strategies, this is probably the best way to kind of reference those and kind of go through, look at them, and we can just check off what you think are the key ones. So.
how about we go back to the main presentation and then go back and then vote on the information to be distributed in the pre-meeting?
So the first part, the introduction, purpose, how to use, and boundaries, and what I'll do is I'll go through and do talking points, and you guys, as a draft, you guys can go ahead, whoever's going to be responsible for doing that can take that and run with it in terms of annotating, adding, whatever you want to do. But it's basically right out of the plan. So it'll be just a summary of what the purpose of the plan is, how the plan is used by people who are reading it, and how it's going to be used in the future, and what the boundaries for the study area are. The next one is basically a quick summary of what's the vision and plan for downtown Littleton. And then the framework, we will have a handout, and so you can actually go through, and in this case, I think a quick discussion of here's how it evolved, here's what we were looking at, and again, a PowerPoint, so you'll see all those slides, and then the final, in terms of here's what our shot of both existing conditions and the future is, and then planning principles, and again, we've gone through it. It's fairly simple to have a summary of those. Key goals, policies, and implementation strategies, I think, is what you guys need to kind of decide, what do you want to hit in terms of each area. And for presentation, we could have one person doing that, we could break it down, multiple people, however you want to do this. And then implementation strategies, again, it all kind of fits together. Actually, it's just 2. 1 and 2, key goals, policies, and implementation strategies, sorry. It's not 3. I repeated myself.
Or were you thinking about 3 as being the timetable for implementation?
Oh, maybe. That's a thought. Maybe I was thinking that. I don't know.
Our time is so limited that in this presentation, that I think we're just really just biting off a lot here in doing this. And I'm thinking, maybe we have the introduction and then go to the key areas and land use and economic development, sustainability, parks and open space, and then just hit a key point in each one of those subject areas is what I'm thinking of. Because, if we do this, it's going to take us the whole night.
Which part do you think takes the longest, Lynn? You think going through the vision, framework, and planning, or?
Right, and just maybe hitting the framework instead of the vision and planning principles.
I think the meat of this is in 2 under the goals policies. That seems to be in it, almost like the introduction and the vision of how it's used could be consolidated into one part of the presentation. And I just plugged in. I thought perhaps no more than 10 minutes on the intro and the vision, 10 minutes on the goals and policies. Now, that may take a little bit longer, and then the implementation strategies might be fairly brief. It's a timetable.
For God's sakes, don't start this presentation and not talk about the vision and how we approach this whole thing.
Right.
That's just...
So it could be 3 presenters, and maybe we should first identify who's interested in presenting, and then kind of divvy that up so people can start to think about what they'd want to talk about. And I'll be the first volunteer to present part of it.
Pardon?
Is Craig presenting on everybody? Congratulations, Craig. You're
Whole thing? 30 minutes.
I'd be happy to do just the introduction, the first 3 minutes.
Again, coming back to the policies and implementation, we are not reading through this document, correct?
No.
Okay. Steve?
No, it's your take on how do you summarize this?
What about having a graphic that boards up with the implementation strategies, having a board up that people can read it, because that is actually is a summary of what's in all the goals and policies. So if somebody sees something that drills them, they're going to be able to know where in the whole plan that they can find that the part they're looking at.
Where are you suggesting this is presented on the
Like one of the
overview?
boards around the room.
Oh, one of the boards.
I would agree. I was actually thinking that as well. It's actually by taking the color and shading to to show the distinction between the land use and each of the various sections, I think is really helpful. I think it breaks it up
You know,
nice.
we could have two big boards sitting there.
Great.
I disagree with that. I think there's a lot, this is a very difficult document to read in a matter of a couple of minutes.
I don't think anybody's going to read it in a couple minutes, but what we may point out and what they may be able to glean from it is, okay, they're talking about this is going to either going to be an ongoing thing or they're going to do it in 1, 2, or 3 years, which gives them some idea of the scale of what we're talking about. We're not going to drag it out for 10 years. We're not going to expect to do it in the next 6 months. It's detail, but you're really just giving the overview. Here's how fast we think we can do this.
But is that what's open for, so I know everything's open for comment as far as here's all the information, but really the comments that we're trying to solicit from them is more of, do we have the right strategies? Do we have the right policies? Did we miss anything? Versus, I wouldn't want to spend so much time arguing over or getting comments on why does this take 24 months versus this take.
I guarantee you'll get a comment on LU 12A. And a rather incisive comment at that. Guaranteed. I'll make a bet of it.
And that's exactly what we want to hear, right? So how do we, so that was hard for me to even scan and find, okay, which one are you talking about? So how do we highlight
Probably
some
even
of that?
get 3-minute comments.
I'd make a book on that one, too.
So do we want to include the implementation strategies on separate boards?
I think so, and that some groups, like the business owners, are going to go right to the economic development, the historic preservation, they're going to go right to historic preservation. So there's going to be certain groups that are going to look at certain implementation sections and may not even be interested in the others. So I don't know that people are really going to read through it, but go just to where they want to focus.
I think in your
throw darts at it.
presentation, though, it would be easy to refer to to this in your presentation of, here's the policies that we think are important, or we want you to take a look at, LU4B, and you turn over on the other page, it's EE2B, or ED2B. It's easy for them to find those, I think, and see what they are. Not necessarily the time frame of the strategy, but just the policy, rather than trying to flip. They don't have a copy of this. They won't have this. And say, it's in there, don't worry about it. But if you show them this, then at least they know all of those policies and goals are in here, right? Everything, this whole thing is right here.
It's a target list, and people will pick and choose. Nobody's going to wade through the whole thing. But you will find some people going right to it and say, you're going to do all that in 12 months? Or you're going to take 3 years to get around to doing that?
So apart from the recommendation of this being presented on a board, this would also be a handout. So again, coming back to the comment that anything we have on a board anywhere in the room would also be a handout, is the expectation.
So should we go ahead and take a vote on that?
What?
On having this as a board? We had somebody motion, I think Jenny motioned. Okay, Steve motions, do we have a second?
Second.
And Jenny second, so do we want this as a handout at the public hearing?
In a board.
And a board?
Yes.
All those in favor? It is Karina against, and so that takes us,
Just one question I have about the portion where comments and questions, so we haven't really got into that yet, but would people be able to get up and circulate and look at the boards during that question and comment period, or do we want them to be seated and full attention on the speaker?
It'd be great to have them all seated, just because it's going to be difficult enough, I think, for everybody to focus on that. But
So I think
Somebody
we
will.
would, so my follow-up to that is I
Somebody
think we
will.
do need to have the handouts then, because otherwise people are going to want to get up, and
Go look,
it's going to be
yeah.
a distraction.
I gotta see. Come look at this over here.
yeah, and it's really distracting to try to manage a meeting when you have so many different things happening in the room. So it really is.
And if they start wandering around wanting to talk at or point to the display boards, then that almost implies that we have to have the portable mic. The portable mic never works for people. It's hard enough to get them to be heard from the fixed mic. So if you've got the handouts and they can sit there and say, well, right here it says, it's a lot easier.
So back to the discussion on what we're going to talk about during the main portion of the presentation. So the introduction?
I think so the vision framework and planning principles are a nice, concise overview of what the intent of this plan is. So I think the vision's very powerful. Again, it's not that we're going to read through all this, but it's the highlights of it. The framework helps them to, ground everyone to what they've seen in the room, what all the areas are that we've considered and how we've considered them. And then again, I think the planning principles, when we talk about small town character, quality of design, economic development, that's very relevant and easily digestible also for the public to hear. Here are all the perspectives that we considered. So I do think that that particular section is going to be a very important section to ground the public of, what is it that we did that guided a lot of all the detail that is to follow. And I think that gives us the opportunity to not necessarily have to spend so much time with the key goals, policies, and implementation summary, especially since we've now provided this as a reference. So this, in essence, now has allowed us, or allowed the public the opportunity to review this and come to us with any questions or comments, and not the burden on us to have to present a lot of it.
Jenny?
And actually, on that as well, when you're talking about not having to go into all the specifics, I think it'd be great to do an overview as part of the policies to introduce each of the sections and just because there really are, especially when I think of some of the sections, there really is kind of an umbrella overview as far as the thrust. And so that would just help people to give them a mindset when they're looking at each of the section, even though we may not go into great detail on each individual, but maybe, if we wanted to call it a couple, but just to help focus. So
To talk about land use.
to talk about just
economic
in
development.
general, the general concepts in land use, what we were trying to achieve, circulation, so each of the sections. Because you're right, with this amount of time, there's not going to be a lot of time to go into the specifics.
And I think that way, again, we're not needing to talk about specific goals or specific policies, but we're just giving that overview and introduction to these sections. And then, again, the expectation is you have read this document, or you can, at that point, maybe can't go read the document to read the goals and policies, but I don't think we want to go through all that detail.
So I think what I heard is that we focus in each section on the goal, which is that first introductory statement with the bullets.
Or a blend that conveys the gist of what we're trying to do. We've got 6 sections there. If you take 3 minutes on each of them, you've just shot most of the time. So you're going to have to boil it down to the essentials.
Maybe
You're not
a
going to
minute
be able to
30.
quote.
Steve, sorry.
I was wondering, Jen, on how much time you think it would take you to present that?
I guess whatever time, I would be open to presenting, but I guess whatever time is available is how concise it would be. So if it has to be within 10 minutes total or less than that, then that's what it is. So, but it seems like we've got 30 minutes, so.
I think you could do it in 10 minutes.
So 10 minutes, is one. I don't know that you'd want to go less than that, because that's really your core.
That gives you 2 minutes per each section, right? Because there's 5 sections there. Land use, 6.
6.
And when I look at the planning principles and I try to equate it to a PowerPoint presentation, I mean, just hitting the main points, it would be almost enough. Rather than just say small town character, quality design, economic development. I mean, to me, that can be done within 48 seconds.
Well, allowing for a little more poetic license and elaborating on those principles, yes.
But it's
Yeah,
a PowerPoint. It's a PowerPoint.
I think the framework will take some time. It's important that they understand the framework. I think that's very key. So it does sound like half an hour overall for this middle section is pretty accurate. Give either call it 15 for the first, 15 for the second, or 10 and 20, and we can see how the night's going. And
How about like 10, 10, 10, 10 for the introduction, purpose, how to use and boundaries, 10 minutes for the vision, framework, and planning, 10 minutes for the introduction to the concepts?
If you shoot for 5 for the first section,
Yeah.
which ought to be
Yeah.
adequate,
Okay.
10 for each of the others, that'll add up to 30
There you
minutes.
go.
Believe it or not, it will add up to
Yep.
30 minutes.
Turn it over to the next presenter.
So 5 for the introduction, and then how much? for-
5, 10, and
10
10.
for the vision and
5
10
for
for the,
the-
yeah.
And then essentially 3 is rolled into 2.
Right, so I've crossed out 3, right? We've just.
Yes.
did we
Just roll it
Okay.
right. We have part of 2 already.
Then 2 morphs into an overview into each of the sections.
10 and 10.
Oh, okay, yes. Does everybody agree with that?
Who gets to build a cat?
Which one do you want, Greg?
Oh, it doesn't matter. Did we say 5, 10, and 10 then? So we're leaving a
Yeah.
little fluff running over. That's good idea.
Flex time, not fluff.
Well, I think Linda should introduce
Okay,
it.
I can do that. And it's 5 minutes.
And it may not take that long. Actually, just do the purpose of the plan, how to use it, and boundaries. I mean, you may be able to do that in 2 or 3 minutes.
3 or 4.
So, yeah.
49.
Somebody will use the extra minutes.
If I could just add something, I love the idea that everybody wants to share in the presentation, but I can just tell you from the public standpoint, it's a bit confusing and you're breaking between, I don't know how you wanted to spread it out, but I would recommend you stick with 2 presenters at the most. Then the other thing is, are you going to present from the dais? So you're going to have your back to the presentation, or I guess you had the one up front. You don't want to have your back to the audience. It's kind of logistically, it's just kind of tough.
Glenn, if you present from standing in front of the dais with the
So you're facing the audience?
Right.
Yeah,
That's worked fairly well in the past.
Can you see the presentation then?
Yeah.
You can put it in front of you, and then it goes
Oh,
on
so
the
you
board.
have a computer screen in front of you? Okay.
Although, again, logistically, that's taking up time moving from here to here, and especially if we have now 3 presenters, unless you guys are all standing there for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Something to think about.
That's easy enough. Say that's easy enough. The second person just as the first person's wrapping up, second person steps up and moves over to her elbow and then steps in. No big deal.
We'll get you a baton to pass to.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it could be 3 people. I think that's, any more than that would be too many.
Yeah. And
But
I think if we transition it well, I don't think it's going to be too,
And having the 3 emphasizes that, look, we see this as 3 different distinct elements. There's the overall orientation, how we're going to use it. There's the vision, what went into pulling all this together and how we organized it. Then there's the detail. So that keeps those sections distinct in the audience's mind. At least we're hoping it'll work then.
so everybody agree to 3? Okay, and then, now, who wants to do what? Jenny, I'm suspecting you want to do the overview. You're like, no.
Oh,
I think that's what Steve suggested, yeah.
the overview, right, for the policies, right, and goals? Yes, yes. So basically number 2 on, as well as the implementation.
which is now wrapped up with 3, right?
Which is, yes, so 2 and 3.
Right.
Yes, that's,
Okay, so I could take one.
That works for everyone?
So Linda's got the intro, purpose, how to use, Craig's got number 1, and Jenny's got number 2.
Okay, so,
And then I think for comments and questions, it goes back to Linda to facilitate that.
It's a meeting, she's the chair.
Right.
Hearing, sorry.
now, do we all sit at the dais to hear, or?
I would think so, yeah, absolutely, yeah. All the regular meeting, or whoever's on that night, so.
Might also help keep that portion of the meeting a little more orderly, when it tends to look a little more formal than what it was before.
I'm sorry, Linda, I missed your question. What was your question? We all what?
We all sit at the dais up there. So,
Pick for the comments, yeah.
As we would for any other public comments or applicants' comments for an application hearing.
okay. Okay, so now that takes us back to the 6:45 to 7:15 timeframe. So what I heard from everybody is that the framework, we want to show the progression in the framework, the height map, and policies. We have the downtown parking map and include the historic district map, and then we already voted on Steve's suggestion to include the implementation strategy. So, pardon? Oh, yeah, and the zoning map.
So the zoning map and the height map are going to be one,
Side by side.
okay.
So that really gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 5 different stations, if you will, or displays.
So do we all agree on that? To include those?
Yeah.
Okay. Hope you guys don't mind, I'm not taking a formal vote.
Good.
It seems like we got a consensus. So then, the wrap-up and reiteration of the process.
That's you again, I think, just in terms of thanking people for coming, letting them know what you're doing, that you're meeting again on the 26th, and then the date for the city council, and what the process is for that, that's ratification of what planning commission has adopted.
But that would also include a formal motion and vote to close the public hearing.
Correct. Yep, sure.
Consideration and actual vote to be continued to the 26th.
Right.
Greg?
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question on the first half hour. Again, I wasn't clear on, we're going to start at 6:45.
We're going to advertise 7 o'clock. If you can be there at 6:45 to start, assuming people will start showing up early, and they will, yeah, some will.
I guess my question was, at 7 o'clock, we were going to announce
We're gonna
the
announce.
process, but then
It's a welcome.
allow until 15 minutes when the actual formal presentation
Right.
starts, right?
There's a welcome, and I think the suggestion too from Matt or Kirk was to have people at the door. And you just kind of saying, here's what's happening, so.
Okay.
perhaps at about 7:10, we should all start up
Yeah.
to the dais so that we're sitting there at 7:15, ready to start the meeting.
Yep. Okay.
Steve?
I was thinking back on our vote that we took on closing the comments at the end of the public hearing. And, we can have, thousands of citizens at home watching this on TV. And, they've only gotten until the end of the public hearing to come up with their comments to us, whether they're going to be emailing them or anything. So I think we should, reconsider on how, people can, maybe cut it off, noon the next day or something, give people a chance, or, that night or something, give people a chance to comment from home.
They can log into the computer and then post a comment on the web
We hope.
before the end of the meeting.
Actually, having done this twice, they can jump to their feet, get into their car, run down here and make a comment. I've done that twice for city council when people were made statements that were patently untrue, so it's not beyond the realm of possibility.
Those that are passionate would do that.
So, what do you guys think of Steve's
Well,
comment?
I guess it's a question for staff then, at what point can they still physically turn it around into?
It depends on the magnitude of the comments, I think. It's a bit of an unknown. I would think if we go till noon the next day, I don't think that's going to be overwhelming. So I don't think we'll get that, I wouldn't anticipate that many more comments. I may be wrong.
On the other hand, Steve's point is, if we have a normal public hearing for an application, the public can be there until right before we terminate the hearing and start considering our action. So, why in this case are we giving an artificial limit of, the night of the 22nd or noon the next day? We're coming full circle back to where we started on this.
And we've publicized this, and it's on the web, and so we've given a lot of opportunities. We're resending a lot of cards, we're contacting the stakeholders, so there's a lot.
At this point, the way we're advertising it is the public hearing is on the 22nd, and so I think the expectation generally is that's the end of the public hearing. That's maybe when you're making a decision, and you could make a decision that night. You could go ahead and actually vote, one way or another on the plan. So, I mean, that's certainly the standard operating procedure, is that you have a public hearing and make a decision. I would guess that's going to be anticipation that because we're advertising that date, that time, that's when people expect to have to give their comments.
I'm fine with that.
The 22nd?
22nd. It's the public hearing. If they were coming to any other public hearing, we would be voting right at 9 o'clock on that item at that time. So.
They can always save their comments for the city council hearing.
Yeah. I suppose if someone ran up on the night of the 26th and said, I have to have my comment, we would let them get their comment in.
Any other comments on the format for the public hearing? Steve?
Will we have an opportunity to see these documents before the public hearing, including the presentation that will be presented by Linda?
Yeah, I think what I need to do is get together with Craig and Jenny probably, at least online or if nothing else, and kind of figure out what we're presenting so we can get the PowerPoint together. So we're coordinating that. In terms of what you're seeing is what you'd like to present, and if you just want particular slides or what you want in terms of it's something that reminds you of what you're going to say. That's often the best, I think, is the kind of key points.
I'd like to add an afterthought. Just, it's too late to do anything about it now, even though we talked about it repeatedly over the last 3.5 years. But something we ought to keep in our minds because it's likely to come up. One of the principles that we started from and talked about repeatedly was balancing private property rights. Your right to develop or use your property the way you want, so long as it doesn't negatively impact mine. We embedded that throughout this. Sooner or later, somebody looking at the height limitation map or something else is going to raise the question of what are we doing about private property rights by proposing rezoning? Start thinking about how we'd respond to it, because it's going to come up. It's too late to put anything in there in writing. We don't have to make it a part of the presentation, but be thinking about it. Just my suggestion.
So are we ready to move on to the next agenda item?
Before we do, can we, since we're not going to have a September 12th meeting prior to this, do we have a recommended date that we can see the presentation draft?
Thank you.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Or
It
just
depends
let-
on what your schedule, I think, as much as anything, in terms of what's going to work for you guys when we get together. We won't-
Or just send us an email. I'll
Okay.
coordinate your schedules, but
Okay.
if you could just give
Yeah, I
us a
think
heads
the
up.
way we might want to start is by putting together just an outline that would allow Dennis and staff to put together some slides. So I don't know if you'd want to see the actual PowerPoint presentation or more of an outline.
I
Would be more helpful.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to see the actual PowerPoint presentation so that we all know what
The
the talking
content.
points are that we're going to be having.
I mean, the outline is for you guys as presenters to be comfortable with it, right? So I am not, particular to the outline, but just want to be familiar with the content and be prepared for the content.
By the Monday night before? Is that?
Yeah, I was going to say after the 12th, sometime after the 12th, because I'd use that night off to probably put it together.
If we can
How
get
about
it
the
distributed by the 19th, staff's going to need time to get the PowerPoint put together.
That doesn't, yeah, it's not true. Good, that's great.
Or
And it'll be a hard copy, I think, because I don't think we can get that out to you electronically, probably.
You couldn't do it electronically? Just to us?
I would think it'd be easy.
Wouldn't it be easier to electronically?
Yeah.
Well, I can see if I can get it emailed to you. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, you
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
absolutely.
We could PDF it or something.
Okay, cool.
Actually, if you guys don't mind, could it be possible by the 16th, so that gives us the weekend, and again, just in case any of us have any comments or feedback, gives all of us a little bit of time, but I don't want to put undue pressure, because that, you might need that weekend as well.
Of course, the problem is,
And I've got PowerPoint on my computer, we could always just meet and then throw it into a presentation on the 12th, if you wanted to.
I'm thinking about my own schedule here. I'm gone from the 8th through the 6th through that following, 18th through the 19th. Not convenient.
Still send a draft out on the 12th and
On the 12th,
subject
yeah.
to your reviewing it when you get back.
It doesn't,
Well, no,
it cuts a week out of your time to prepare.
right. Yeah, Craig
It's okay,
wants to do it on the 12th.
whatever you guys feel most comfortable, I mean,
If, I already know what the content, I think, of my slide, I mean, it's going to come right out of the.
Really?
plan.
Okay.
My part, I think, is easier than Jenny's,
Okay.
as far as putting that together.
Okay.
So if I could just get the graphics
Sure.
from you, and I
Sure.
can put it in the PowerPoint.
Oh, no, I can get the PowerPoint done before I go, probably, or after I get back, so I'll be back on the 19th, so.
Yeah, I care less about seeing all the details and the graphics and having input is just knowing generally where the presentations
What the
are
words are.
going in advance. So I don't sit there and do a double take in the middle of somebody's discussion of one thing or another.
Because, just from my standpoint, the diagram, these framework diagrams are really powerful, and I think, just talking through how they layer over each other is be the bones of presentation.
Okay. If, let's kind of figure out, I'll look at my calendar too, let's kind of, we'll talk in terms of what's going to work for both of you individually.
And I'll try to see what I can do. This week is pretty busy, but the following week start getting into it, because I would like, it'd be nice to have a couple, some pictures. I don't know if it's possible, but to have, to just talk through some of the land use, the circulation, to each of the sections, just to, I guess I like pictures to talk to I think that'll help the people as well to connect
Sure.
with what we're doing.
And I think it'd be best if we use the photos that are in here.
That's exactly what I was thinking,
Yeah, so
yes.
if you pick those
yes.
out, I'll just talk to Chris and we'll get them.
Okay, I was just wondering if that would be okay.
And I don't know how you guys have done PowerPoint drafts, but I usually sit there and rough out the outline where I'm going to go, and I'll leave a space for graphic here to be X, Y, Z. You don't have to have it in front of you, especially since we have them all in front of us. So as far as roughing out a draft for distributing, so we know where you guys are headed with the presentation, that's easy. Doesn't take staff time, doesn't take formal assembly of the PowerPoint. That can wait until Dennis gets back.
I guess that's what I was referring to as the outline.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so basically the outline, working through that before Dennis leaves.
If we can, yeah, that'd be great.
Any other comments on the presentation?
thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, guys. All right, so that takes us to,
Work program, and we just wanted to talk about this real briefly, and Glenn's got some thoughts on it too, kind of coming in and looking at the big picture. And I mentioned briefly, I think before, that a lot of this is going to be, the bigger picture, again, going to be dependent on what city council looks at the priorities for the city as a whole and for our department, and what they are seeing as priorities for moving forward. Glenn, you want to kind of proceed with that a little?
Sure. One of the things, or the process that I'm used to is a part of the budget is when we present the work program, not just for Planning and Zoning Commission, but for the whole department. So that's the way I think I've been proceeding. I think we, at one time, talked about the beginning of September. Our presentation to City Council is, I think it's the 14th through the 16th? 12th through the 14th. So at that point is when we would have a draft of the presentation, and again, it would be not just the planning staff, but the building department as well, to kind of give the council an overall, these are the things that we expect to do in the next year. And then we'd be ready to present it to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Now, we really know, because we're adopting this plan, kind of where your needs and wants are. So I don't know that we need to have a whole meeting to go over the work plan, but I would feel much more comfortable presenting it to the council first as part of the budget, and then following up with the Planning Commission. So that would be, we could do that on the 26th, if we get through the downtown plan quickly.
And also maybe the ordinance, the language amendment we're talking about.
Potentially, we have a zoning code amendment as well.
That would be a lot of work.
Everybody's looking ominous. It's not that
sounds,
ominous.
sounds like we're going to bump that one to first.
We're
meeting in
already
October.
working on the work plan. That's-
And that's okay.
You know, one of the suggestions that was made during the annual retreat that we had was to actually review this on a routine basis and to evaluate, you know, where we're at and where we need to go. So I think that's also going to be very important as we're progressing through the year. Okay, anything else on the work plan?
Well, let me ask, back to Glenn's point, you mentioned, there's a zoning hearing on the 26th, and there's also the work plan, which ideally would happen then. Which is more time sensitive?
Probably the zoning amendment.
So then we could possibly put it on the agenda for the 26th if we have time, and push it to the
You
next
could
meeting if
continue
we
it, sure.
don't. It's hard to say how much time, especially the approval of the comp plan will be.
That takes us to, we've got 17 minutes left. We've got the review of the parking studies.
I have hard copies of that if people don't have that with them.
Well, and one of the suggestions that we've made in the past was to talk about what's our overall approach to parking before we even review the parking study, so to get a context on how we want to evaluate parking. And is that appropriate to discuss tonight? Everybody's like, say that
I
again.
mean, it's a little bit of chicken and egg, I guess, just because I think if you have this as background and have this discussion, you get a sense of what all's been done. And one of the things we've heard over and over again, we don't need another parking study. We definitely don't, and when you go through this, you see why. People say that we don't need another parking study. We've had a lot of parking studies, and there's good information in here that for the most part probably has not changed, probably still current, I would think. The numbers may have changed a little tiny bit in terms of the available parking and the demand, but overall, in terms of what you see here, is pretty accurate, I think, still. Hasn't changed that much. Because we haven't had huge things happening downtown, huge input. So I think it's worthwhile kind of getting this perspective, as well as kind of having an overview of it. Yeah.
The one piece of information that none of those parking studies gives us, the one piece of information that we have for every other commercial development, every place else in the city, is at least a vague notion of how many square feet of retail, restaurant, or other space is there and going to produce what kind of a demand for parking spaces. We know nothing about that for downtown. To even talk about a parking plan for downtown without having some notion of scale, how much office, retail, restaurant, footage there is in downtown, and therefore how many parking spaces you need after you take into account light rail and everything else. To even start that discussion without that piece of information, at least in general terms, is silly.
Well, I think that's a perfect lead-in terms of, is that your responsibility, or is that something you put together? This is part of our charge, that we want to have a parking program put in place, and we're going to look at, odds are, as you've heard over and over again from Sarah Jade and other folks I know, is that that's nothing that traffic engineers can do. It's nothing it's nothing that planners can do. It really is very technical in terms of the kind of experience that takes to actually put those things together. So we're looking at a consultant, probably that, the majority of that. And so what is key, I think, is what do you want to come out of that? And if you have a sense of kind of information you're going to feel is necessary in order to feel comfortable with that, then I think that's exceedingly useful information. So, that's real basic information in terms of what are the existing numbers, in terms of what's the square footage of different uses, what do we anticipate in terms of kind of a trend, what's the trend we're seeing, are we going to see a lot more retail, or which is very parking intensive, or are we going to see something which, warehousing, which is not parking intensive? What are we going to see for land uses downtown? So you have to make some kind of guesses on a lot of that stuff, but that is something you can say, here's what we want to see as a good sense of what the land uses, both existing and projected, will be. Because I think the essential thing is for you to get out of it what you want, and for you to be reviewing what material comes back and what steps you want to see that. But it really is a staff and consultant kind of process that you as Planning Commission drive in terms of here's what you want as product, and you review that product, and then you decide whether or not you want to move that on to City Council. So.
Well, and that's why I was thinking about doing like some brainstorming so we can actually say, this is what we need to consider here. These are our goals in putting this together. What do we have to do to be able to finish recommendations for parking for the City Council? And I think that's a whole planning effort, if you will, to put together almost a project plan. I mean, what is it that we need to do? How do we need to do it? What are our goals in this overall process?
The other way you can do that is if you've got your goals, just in terms of what you want to accomplish, if you do go out to consultants and you do an RFQ or an RFP in terms of here's what we want to achieve, here's our existing situation, you get proposals back from people in terms of how we would do this. Here's what we would propose in terms of process. Here's what we propose in terms of product. Here's what we've seen working and what we think you're going to need. And then you and staff get a chance to look at that so that you don't have to know all that in advance. It really is advantageous, I think, a lot of times to actually depend on those experts to tell you, here's what we've seen work and what we think you might need. So, Glenn, do you want to kind of...
Yeah, well, and I agree with both of what Dave and Dennis is saying. When I read the parking studies, I mean, one of the things that kind of jumped out at me is had a good idea of what land uses and what their peak times are and what their parking demand is and an overall count of the number of spaces, but it wasn't real exact as far as what the vacancy rate is and some of the land uses that have changed since, when was the last one done, Dennis? Was it 2004?
7 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. So number one, I'd say our first step is get that inventory down, figure out exactly what our land uses are out there. And in fact, in our budget, we're putting a small amount of money because I don't see that as a real high-powered consultant that's needed. It's somebody who can really do an on-the-ground inventory of what uses are there and how many, and when the parking is in highest demand. And from that, I think staff can build a fairly good model in the 12 months. Then I think we're into a big policy question of how do we solve the bigger question as we go into the future and we start building heights of 50 feet and we're adding X amount of square footage of office. That's then kind of a bigger question that means, well, now we might have to look at some kind of central parking structure. But boy, that's something I think the council's going to really have to give us direction because we're talking about probably outline of public funds. So I know we talked about we had 24 months and we kicked it back to 12 months, but I really see that 12 months an ability for staff and a small amount of lower level consulting effort to get us to the point where we really have a good handle on what our parking is now. And that's what you guys kind of struggle with, are the cases that are coming before you. They want to reduce their parking demand. Gee, we don't know. And you need a little bit better information, I guess, to give you an idea of how do we solve it in this particular case. And then I think it's a bigger issue of, okay, in 5, 10, 15 years, the demand is going to be this, and we just don't have enough land area. And That's something where you probably do need a little bit higher level of consulting.
But at least by that point, we'll have a starting point. We'll understand where we are. Then we can start factoring in things like the effect of light rail, in things like any residential developer trying to build downtown who doesn't provide enough on-site parking for his people without us having to tell him is a fool and going to lose his butt. We can factor all those things in, but we have to have a statistical starting point that means something. And all we have right now is surveyors telling us that, well, at certain times of the day, you seem to have plenty of spaces available, so what are you worried about? Or we have the public comment, 55% people saying I'm sorry, Steve, correct me, 55 saying we do have a problem and 45 saying we don't have a problem, or the other way around. But it's subjective. Just like the statistical studies on what times of the days we have enough spaces is a subjective judgment. But if we don't have the basics that we'd have asked for any applicant coming in, any developer coming in saying, well, I'm going to build this shopping center, and I only want to put in 200 parking spaces, but I'm not going to tell you how many square feet of developed space I'm putting in and what I'm using it for. Staff would never bring it to us, and we certainly wouldn't listen to them for very long.
There's too many missing variables.
Exactly right.
So what is the city council's expectation of the planning commission with regard to parking?
I think my understanding typically is they're looking for you to set policy, what your expectations are, what you want to see, and kind of manage the process in terms of checking in terms of, is this consistent with what we're trying to achieve in the downtown plan? So, and then signing off on it. So you're kind of they're going to be seeing it at some point as well. They may see it at a work session, kind of mid-scope, mid-process. You may see it 4 times, in terms of check-in, and then kind of help act as go-between between council and the consultant and staff in terms of, we think you're on base, we think you're off base, in terms of what we heard from the public and what we have in our plan.
So basically, staff and planning commission will do the legwork. We'll define the problem, identify possible solutions and policies, and then it's up to city council.
I think you sign off on that. I think we have gotten a lot of that already from the survey, and then we're going to have the consultant and staff go through and say, again, as Glenn said, here's the inventory, so you can start identifying that stuff, and then we present it and say, when we get products, we say, here's what this is saying, and where do we go with this?
Then one thing we're going to have to do as a group is define, before we decide how we're going to survey the square footage and match it up to required parking or expected parking, we're going to have to define what area we're going to consider. And it isn't going to be the whole downtown. I mean, that's one of the problems with the past studies is they keep sweeping in Arapahoe Community College parking and Arapahoe County office parking, and that has nothing to do with the downtown parking, okay? It is not a solution, not a problem. It has nothing to do with it. So we're going to have to define the area. How far away from Main Street can we count parking and count the developed square feet, offices, commercial, retail, or whatever, to be able to define the situation. But taking into account hundreds of parking spaces at ACC when it's not available is not helpful.
Glenn, how would you suggest we proceed with this?
As far as what Dave was talking, as far as how you define the area, I think you figure out what's comfortable for people to walk is one way of doing it. Where I'm used to, it's 300 feet. Now here it's probably a little bit longer, and then you go off your main uses on Main Street, and I don't know, maybe a block up, and you go 300 feet from that. It's just off the top of my head is how you might define the area, the study area.
But what I heard David also say is we have to exclude what's not publicly available.
The only issue with that is if there is not sufficient parking at ACC, then that starts overlapping into your downtown parking. And so I think you usually have to consider that relationship in terms of, do they have sufficient parking? And if not, what's that mean? And anytime we've looked at parking solutions, you go through these studies, there's always a sense at least that there may be a potential for some kind of joint solution for some of these things.
That would be identifying outside threats, but our focus is on the downtown businesses, residential, transit, whatever, and making sure that we have or are requiring enough parking with the current situation and as our development plan allows development to occur. If there are outside threats like overflow parking for RTD, overflow parking for ACC, overflow parking, right, yeah. I mean, we can do that, but that's not going to, it shouldn't be affecting our policies on what we require of businesses within the downtown business district to provide in the way of parking. So let's treat them as two separate problems. We recognize the threat, but our focus is on what we're doing as policy to assure that developers are allowing for enough parking in the downtown area.
I guess my concern was, do we have like any kind of recommended agendas or specific topics that we need to address in kind of a logical format? Or do we just wait for you guys to come back to us with something?
Well, one way would be in the work plan, and kind of the format I'm talking about would be in a little bit more detail of what the steps would be, when the milestones, when we would check in with you. So I think by the 26th, we'll have a pretty good idea of what at least that initial process would be.
Sounds great.
So is there anything prior to the 26th that you want or expect us to do?
No, other than read through it and just become familiar with what has been done. I think this is useful, just background information in terms of that, and why people continually say we don't need another parking study.
And
so how we distinguish ourselves from that.
Okay. And when you said, one of the things that council would want us to do is set policy. So would policy look like something that says it's one space per 400?
No, I think policy, it looks like what you've got in the plan, which says that we want to develop a parking program that accomplishes these things, that treats everybody equitably, that does not detract from the historic character of downtown and at the same time meets the needs of the retail businesses downtown. That kind of stuff that you've already got in there is really, I think, what they need to hear, and we need to hear too as we go forward in terms of how do we actually write a program.
What does that plan look like to deliver on that policy?
Exactly, yeah.
Steve's just waiting. I'm going to disagree with that. We've already done that. Okay, it's general, it's generic. We said when we left it general and generic, we were then going to launch into coming up with guidelines for a parking program. So it's sooner or later we got to really deal with the issues. Okay, we can't get around with generic comments forever.
So then our goal would be to approve a parking program that's going to be compiled by some combination of consultants, ourselves, and city staff.
That's what this says.
Exactly. So it's.
We can't say it again and say we've done what we said.
So we're going to be approving a plan, a parking program.
And what's going to come up in that program, in that study, is questions. You're going to have trade-offs. And that's where Planning Commission is going to step in and say, here's the range of trade-offs that we think we're comfortable with, or maybe even choosing trade-offs. Which of those you go for?
And we've already started identifying some of these, like the idea of reductions for certain characteristics of the plan. So we've already thrown that in, and I mentioned a couple of the others. The fact that you start from all businesses have the same required number of spaces per 100 square feet or 200 square feet, whether they're over on Broadway or downtown, and then you start looking for, okay, how much of those businesses are serving walk-in residential-oriented clients? You can get a reduction. How much of those are going to be attracting people who are using light rail? You can get a reduction. You have to start looking at those factors and then presenting the rationale to City Council for why you're going to amend the kind of guidelines that you use elsewhere, what the basis for that is.
Okay. We are got 2 minutes left. Can we revisit the meeting goals and upcoming meetings, Dennis?
Yeah, I think the upcoming meetings, I think we've done a great job. We really appreciate everybody's work tonight in terms of getting us set for the public hearing. I feel comfortable that we've got a good direction and we'll be prepared. We've made some changes to what you saw in the non-revised draft agenda. The next meeting is that may be of interest is September 6th, Tuesday. City Council will have a public hearing on the revised lighting code. That's something that you made a recommendation on. Historic Downtown Littleton Merchants Association meets on the 7th, the next morning after City Council. That's 8 to 9. Linda and I will be there. Anybody else who'd want to be there, it would be great. Planning Commission, we're going to cancel the meeting on the 12th. Historical Preservation Board meets on the 19th. Craig has been doing a great job of going, and they really appreciate it. I don't know if you're available on the 19th to be there.
Yeah, since Tony can't make it, I'll put that on my calendar.
Okay, great, okay. And then Planning Commission again on the 22nd. We've got the public hearing. On the 26th, we'll have a regular meeting at which we will consider adoption of the plan and also proposed language amendment and work program. So.
And any overall comments on the meetings or any suggestions for future meetings real quick? And we're right on the nose for 9 o'clock. No other comments? Then do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
I don't know what the mic is that Dennis put on.
Yeah.